should be recording now.
Yes. Yep.
All right.
You got it.
Hi, everyone. So Dawn, I will ask you to share the otter skull a bit later. Yeah, thanks. So thanks everyone. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge yesterday and today already. And I'm just so excited to be back and continue this work with you. So as I think was mentioned yesterday, we're really going to be building on what we did yesterday, right? That's the idea, because what we're trying to do is model what you would do with your students as they explore a complex phenomenon. So yesterday, we talked about we started our river otter models, right, in groups. We did breakout groups. Then I introduced you to Seek, and over the break, most of you were able to make an observation of some kind using the Seek app, and then share out that information after the break and use that information to inform your models. And so just as a reminder, we're working off of this phenomenon about river otters and their presence in Marin County in the last 20, 30 years. And just as a reminder that an anchoring phenomenon is a puzzling event or process whose full explanation requires a wide range of science ideas to be coordinated with one another and with evidence. So an anchoring phenomenon isn't just anything. You want it to be something that's engaging, that often is locally relevant, that requires synthesizing information over time. Again, this could be over weeks of instruction. So we're very quickly, just in the 2 days that we're working together, or 3 days that we're working on this phenomenon, we're going to be synthesizing our ideas and making them public about and trying to understand this phenomenon of the river otters returning to Marin County, right? We looked at this river otter range map. You guys have seen this a couple times now, but more recent observations, especially in the last 20, 30 years, have shown that they're being seen in places other than within this pink area. And this is a map from California Department of Fish and Game. So I think most of you saw this video on Wednesday, but I'll just show it really quickly because I just think it's so wonderful. But this is how we started this investigation, right? Is we looked at that range map, and then this is one of the videos from where that star is on that map that I just showed you. And here's some river otters coming out of the water, and this was recorded again by the River Otter Project that's based in Marin, and you're going to be hearing from Megan on Friday. And they set up cameras to capture some of these observations to figure out where the otters are located. So otters sniffing, checking out the camera. All right. So we use this video as one of the ways to think about, what do otters need? Where do they live? Why might they be coming back to Marin, right? And so you generated some really amazing questions in your groups on Wednesday about, what's changed? Why is this happening now? And how is this related to the health of our watershed and the ecosystem that otters live in? So from that, we decided that our driving question, right, is that why have river otters returned to Marin in the last 40 years? And I had you do some brainstorming yesterday individually, and then you started working in groups to build your models. And remember that the purpose of the model was to just get your initial ideas down on paper. You're not looking for right answers. We're not worried about that right now. But the idea is that everyone was contributing their thoughts and ideas. People were using different color pens so we could see all the different contributions from different people. And that you were writing down your questions as you did this, right? Making sure that you were keeping stock of what are you still wondering and thinking about that we would have to investigate in order to answer this driving question. So I gave you this template, showing otter, one side of it where you put your ideas about what was going on 40 years ago when river otters were not present in Marin, and then what's happening today, what has changed. And again, I think I mentioned this yesterday, I'll say it again, that you can scaffold this in a lot of different ways for students at different grade levels or depending on your audience, right? So I gave you a few different things like the little otter pictures and some plants and some water to play around with, but you could build this up or break this down at various levels of complexity depending on what's grade appropriate, age appropriate for your students. And I just want to point out that this work is really different from, I think, how a lot of us, especially people who are now educators, or certainly when I was a student, this is very different from what group work looked like when I did it as a student. Traditionally, in the past, my experience was that, the group gets the assignment, the group divides up the task, and then after, the members of the group completes their part of the task, the group comes back together, right? And then if a group grade is going to be assigned, very often one or two people get left with pulling it all together and making it work and making sure it's complete. And I think this is just the nature of how group work has been scaffolded traditionally, right? In a lot of ways. And I should say I credit this work to some of my colleagues in the East Bay, Jim Clark and Samantha Johnson, who really talk about the difference between that kind of task and group-worthy tasks. What are tasks that should be done by groups, because they really can't be completed without the knowledge and the synthesis and the ideas of everyone in the group. So the idea is that a group-worthy task should provide lots of opportunities for extension, exploration, brainstorming, right? And that they're truly three-dimensional. We talked yesterday about what are the science and engineering practices that we actually did in those 2 hours yesterday, and we checked most of them off, which was pretty awesome. But we should be looking at, disciplinary core ideas and cross-cutting concepts, which we'll talk about a little more today. Again, that group-worthy tasks should require complex problem solving. And again, as I mentioned, can't be completed without contributions of all the group members, and that really both the entire group and individuals are accountable for the product, right? I said that once the ideas are on the page, they are the group ideas, right? But at the same time, we want to see all different colors, different pens to show that all of you have been writing and contributing to the ideas that are present on the models. So any thoughts or ideas or responses to those ideas about a group task versus a group worthy task, and how modeling is again, I think, group worthy and should require group members to be problem solving and thinking together? Any thoughts or responses to that?
I made an observation yesterday, Jessica, when you were asking about what your teaching moves were toward the end, and yep. I made a comment in the chat that applies to this, and that's that the amount of learning that took place in the group just by having fostered a requirement and a forum for all that discussion. Teacher doesn't put any input into that other than just providing a forum, and the learning takes place when people are actually putting words together, not only for themselves but for others. And so I always called it being conversant with the material. And so this this model here, the group worthy tasks, embodies that completely, whereas the other, you go off in your corner, you do your work, and there's no dialogue, there's no conversation. And in my experience, the actual learning took place entirely in the dialogue. So noticing that you didn't put any new information, there wasn't any fact-based stuff put on there. It was all people exploring what they already know. And that's something that I tried to point out in the workshop I gave earlier in the week. If you can foster the questions, you can step back and just watch the learning take place.
Exactly. Very well said, Dawn. It's about providing those opportunities, right? And the reality that students, and of course you as adults, you're resources to each other. And you can certainly be learning from each other and sharing ideas and building off of each other's knowledge. I think yesterday I asked the question a lot, especially in the group number 4 that I was working with, like, does anyone want to add to that? What do you think about that? What additions would you make, or how would you change that idea? Does that work? Do we all agree on that? So, these are the questions that you can be asking and creating more opportunity for students to be sharing and thinking openly so that their ideas become resources for everyone. So thank you for that, Dawn. Anyone else want to say anything about their experience yesterday, co-creating, constructing the model? Okay, well, you know, all of you, I know were engaged in that process yesterday. And then we took this an extra step, right? And we thought more specifically about one of the questions that you generated, which is, what do otters look for and need, right? And then that was the context in which we used SEEK. And we thought about what are the organisms that we're observing and identifying using SEEK, and how might those be connected or related to the otters and the river otters and their habitat. I introduced briefly that there's also this resource out there called iNaturalist, which is really cool. I'm going to show you a couple more images from iNaturalist today. But this is where SEEK gets its data, is from iNaturalist. I'm not sure if I stated that explicitly yesterday. So the two are very much related, but SEEK is the version that is for younger learners. But I think, as Dawn said yesterday, I love the stuff for younger learners. It's fun and accessible, and you know, so it was really designed, I think, primarily also to keep kids safe. It doesn't tell kids, it doesn't tell a database where you are, your location, any personal information, but it also is connected to this amazing database of information in iNaturalist. And it's a very more simple point and shoot kind of application, rather than iNaturalist, which has a lot of information, and it can be really dense and hard to navigate for much younger learners. So just so you know, iNaturalist is out there as a resource. You guys made some SEEK observations, and then you shared them publicly on a Jamboard, right? Which was great. And then we talked about that there are lots and lots of questions that could be generated from students making observations using SEEK. And again, these are questions that you would hope students would be generating if you ask them, what questions do you have about your organism? So again, where does it live? What does it need? Does it, is this a native species, or was it introduced? What seasons might I see this species, or how might things that humans do, like noise or pollution or urbanization, affect this species? So these are questions that a lot of you generated yesterday, and again, providing that opportunity for students to generate those questions is really wonderful. I talked a little bit about the shifts in instruction, right? And that we're really trying to shift from just learning scientific facts to really constructing explanations, especially around, again, explaining the river otters. Why are they here now? This is an amazing and hopeful story about resilience in our ecosystems and this amazing organism. So we want to be able to explain that. We want our learning to be meaningful. We want students to figure things out together and talk to figure them out. So, and then we talked about how we, hit on a lot of the science and engineering practices through the work that we did yesterday. Okay, so I just wanted to give a recap. I know we probably have at least one or two people who weren't here yesterday, and just to remind us where we are. So today, what we're going to be doing is to continue briefly our discussion of modeling and student discourse practices. Then we're going to do a gallery walk. I'm going to show you how you can do a gallery walk with students' models that are constructed on Jamboard. We're going to build a gotta have it consensus checklist from our models to talk about what are the things that we know we need to have in our models. And if we don't have them and we agree on them as a group, we can go back and then revise our models. And we're also going to be introduced to some more information today that I'm going to share with you to help you revise those models and give you a little more information based on the questions that you had yesterday about the otters, about their ecology, about where they live, what they do, what they need. And so again, just to continue our discussion of modeling and student discourse practices, again, the big idea is that we're trying to put discrete bits of information into constructing knowledge, right? Making those connections. I think someone yesterday so eloquently said, like, I just want to understand the web of all the connections. And I agree. And that's what you want. You want your students to be, thinking in that way and looking for those relationships, those cause and effect relationships between different parts of the system in which they live, right? Because here, when you're building knowledge, you're really building that systems perspective of understanding the components and how they interact in the world around you. And as I mentioned yesterday, again, a lot of these practices and ideas are not my own, but come from especially two main sources: Next Gen Storyline Approach out of Northwestern and Ambitious Science Teaching out of University of Washington. And I really do encourage everyone to purchase the Ambitious Science Teaching book or take a look at their website. It's a really wonderful resource for all grade levels on teaching practices. And just to, again, extend on what I said earlier, about having discussions and using explanatory modeling activities, it really provides opportunities for thinking, right? And making that thinking public, and making sure that the resources, that the student ideas become resources for others. They can build on each other's knowledge. It also helps us as teachers realize who's being silent, right? Who's not engaging, who might not be feeling confident that they have ideas, but hopefully providing and then scaffolding opportunities for them to become more engaged in that learning and participating in activities like model building. And of like any other discipline, it's a way to practice using the language of that discipline, right? In this case, scientific ideas. And I even know as a grad student, I remember like just acquiring all of this vocabulary that I didn't have before, and needing to have these like small group discussions or, discussions with colleagues about, okay, how are these ideas related? What does this actually mean? Let's unpack these ideas. So everyone needs that at every level in terms of building their understanding. They need to use the ideas that they're learning about, right? And really be able to have opportunities to talk about them. So this is why we're using these practices. And the other word that's often used to describe what's going on, what students are doing, is sense making, right? We're teaching for sense making, students making sense of the world. And so what does this look like? It's, again, we're trying to model some of these practices just in this very short time that we have together, but the idea that students improve their explanations and their models of a complex phenomenon over time, right, over the course of the unit. And then we're not just looking for right answers, but the idea is we all start someplace, but we really want to see growth and improvement. And the teacher's role, as Dawn also kind of pointed out, is like yesterday, I just provided those opportunities for sense-making talk, for people to converse and share what they know. And of course, as I've said at least 3 or 4 times already today, students make that thinking, visible so it can become a resource and be critiqued by others in the classroom, primarily their peers, right? And so in reality, this also very much models what happens within, for scientists when they have this kind of discourse, right? Peer review is a really big part of it. So we are modeling what it means to engage in those science practices, even, from the youngest of ages up until, being a professional scientist. These are things that are done to help us grow as researchers, as students. And so, we want to provide these opportunities for sense making. And we provide opportunities for sense making around anchoring phenomena, because we know that students learn best when context is highly embedded or contextualized. It feels relevant to their lives. So again, we picked an organism that could be living in your neighborhood, right? Or that you could see on a walk a mile or 2 from your home. And the idea is that, you're going to have to revise your ideas. The ideas are revisited many times, and you're going to increase your depth of understanding of the anchoring phenomenon over the course of the unit and connect ideas to each other. And it's very important that students are able to really revise those ideas publicly, right? And share with you what they know now that they didn't know before, and get that feedback from others as they revise their thinking and do that sense making. Okay, I'm just throwing a lot of big ideas here at you around the practice. So I just wanted to give you a little context of where all that came from. Also, some of you, again, yesterday saw me using some of these talk moves with you, where I was asking you, I was probing, I was saying, can you make your ideas public? Can you write that down? What do you think about that? I was pressing some of you. I was saying, can you provide evidence or justification or give more examples? Can you explain more what you mean, right? And following up, just saying, say more. What do you think? How is your idea different from, or how can you build on that idea? Opening up crosstalk is another great move. Asking kids to prompt kids to talk to each other. Respond to what student A said. What does that mean to you? Does that make sense? Someone pointed out to me yesterday that wait time is really important, right? Sometimes we stood there and waited. We said, okay, well, let's think about this. And sometimes that you know, it takes 30 seconds or a minute, which can feel like a long time, but that giving kids time to process is really important. I often also, you know, did a lot of revoicing yesterday. Someone would share something and I'd say, I hear you. I hear that you said this. This is interesting. Can anyone else build on that idea? So I would sometimes pair revoicing with a follow-up or pressing or opening up crosstalk. And then focusing in is another thing that you might do, which is where you take part of maybe the model and you say, okay, tell me more about this part of your model. What does that mean? Can you expand on that idea? And ask more about that part of their explanation. So I really love having this, honestly, kind of in my back pocket when I'm teaching, as just a reminder of like, what are the things I can be doing constantly as I'm moving around the room to engage students in this kind of talk and sense making. Anyone have any thoughts or comments about the resources that I've shared in the last 10 minutes? So, are these useful? Is it interesting? Okay, I see some thumbs up. Okay. And just to remind you that, of course, all of this comes back to, you know, a three-dimensional learning, thinking about what does it mean to actually address the next generation science standards, and recognizing that, you know, from very early grade levels, you know, 3rd grade all the way through high school, and you know, students are asked to develop models, right, to actually use that science and engineering practice. And so these are two that I pulled out that I think are relevant to the way that we're thinking about this anchoring phenomenon. Whether you're teaching it at 3rd grade or 5th grade, you could actually be talking about the otters and learning about the otters to address these standards, right? Talking about life cycles in 3rd grade. And understanding the life cycle of the otter or the otter's food, and understanding that all of them have these common phases of, you know, birth, growth, reproduction, and death. And so getting at that cross-cutting concept of patterns. But then in 5th grade, you know, you're really thinking big about the spheres, you know, the geosphere, biosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere. Develop a model, show how they're all interacting. And so we're actually going to do something later today in the 2nd session that gets at this standard specifically, if you're interested, because I know this is a standard that is not very specific, right? You could approach this in a lot of different ways. So I'm going to show you one way that you could actually address this standard, this 5th grade standard, about using the otters as an anchoring phenomenon. Okay, so really quickly, I just provide some other resources in the slides for thinking about what makes a good phenomenon, right? So this otter story is wonderful because there is a change over time, right? The otter's range is changing and we're trying to explain something that's changing over time. So what's tricky is when we have general phenomena, sort of like, there are cool things in the world that we want students to learn about, like where do humpback whales live, or what is ocean acidification, which some of you were talking about yesterday. Does that affect otters? What's going on there? And then, like, what is the rock cycle, right? These are all related to disciplinary core ideas that are part of NGSS, but we can contextualize those ideas, you know, with a little bit of work. I'm not saying it's easy. So don't get me wrong, but the idea is that we want students to be thinking about not just like where do gray whales live, but like we're here in California and you can go out to, you know, Bodega Bay, and I can't tell you how many times I've been disappointed and not seen gray whales, but there are certain times of the year when we can expect to see gray whales, and why is that? You know, so trying to explain those patterns of migration in certain animals, or, you know, instead of asking the big question, what is ocean acidification, ask, why are young oysters not surviving off the California coast? Why do we see that oysters, which people grow for food, right, and also live naturally in our ecosystems, why are they not growing as fast? Why are the larvae dying, right? Or what is the rock cycle? You could, again, just contextualize that to like, what kinds of rocks are found in my neighborhood? And then learning how to explain what are the processes that create those types of rocks that are in California. Now, California, that's a very complicated and interesting question because California geology is awesome and amazing and complex. So, you know, there's a lot to unpack there, but the idea is that you're bringing it home, right? And then you're thinking about the processes that are related to explaining what's in your backyard. Okay, So as you're designing experiences, right, lessons, units, you can be thinking about, why are we doing what we're doing? How does it connect back to this anchoring phenomenon? What will we figure out? What kind of evidence do we need? Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? How do we engage in those, science and engineering practices, the process of science? And then how does this activity really, again, bring it back to that anchoring phenomena? How are we helping students explain the world around them? And as I mentioned before, to really get at knowledge, to really build that knowledge and make connections explicit. Okay, so that was a lot of just background information that I wanted to give you guys, because I think it's important to sort of know where these practices are coming from, especially if you want to be using them with your students. And again, this takes a lot of time to develop, and I know all of you, of course, have experience working with students, but don't expect to do all of them at once, all on the same day or all in the same unit. It's a practice that you can build up over time, and that I certainly am still learning every day about how to do this kind of work with learners effectively. And I always learn so much from teachers as well as they do this work with their students. Any questions, comments, thoughts before we move on? Okay, so today we're going to kick off the rest of the morning with a gallery walk of our otter models. So does anyone know what a gallery walk is, or want to share how they run gallery walks in their classrooms? What does a gallery walk mean? Chris, do you want to?
Isn't it when you have a project or something to display, and then kids can walk around and see what other kids have created? And sometimes I use Post-its, and they can make comments and put the Post-its next to what they've created to give a little feedback to fellow students.
Awesome, thank you, Chris. Does anyone want to build on that idea of what is feedback? What kind of feedback might students give each other in a gallery walk?
Well, as teachers, you can kind of set, the questions. Okay, now look for, what are some things that are positive? And so for that walkabout, your, Post-its or however you want to do it, giving them positive feedback. You can also change it, to give them constructive criticism. What would you change, or what do you see, especially in the engineering process as they're creating different prototypes, they can get some feedback from others.
Yep, sounds good. Anyone want to build on that idea? I think I heard someone.
Yeah, Cindy, I was just going to add that when I do gallery walks, I was really surprised in the beginning, especially with engineering tasks, how everyone in the group wants to share how they constructed it, or what were the steps in making it. They're so proud of their work. And then that leads to great feedback as well. But the pride in what they've done is really wonderful to see.
Yeah, so it's thanks for speaking to that, Cindy, because part of it is about, again, it's that public display of this is what I've created, and making that a resource for everyone else, right? And sharing the knowledge across the classroom, right? Because very often we get very focused on, like, this is the group we're working with and this is what we're trying to create, but that it's important that all of us work within a larger community, of course, right, within the classroom. And again, this completely mirrors how scientists work, because we all work within a broader scientific community. And part of what we do as scientists is go to conferences and meet new people and make those connections and share those ideas publicly. So it's important to acknowledge that this is what scientists do, right? Is making your ideas public and a resource for everyone else. So thank you for sharing out about your experiences with gallery walks and the purpose that they serve. So you guys yesterday were given this template, right? And then you populated it with some really beautiful drawings and images and questions and notes. And so what I did, I'm just going to scribe it for you in case you want to do this yourself. On Jamboard, there's an option to save each frame of the Jamboard as an image. So I downloaded all the Jamboards as an image. Then I created a new Jamboard and I uploaded all of the frames into that Jamboard, and then I labeled them with the group numbers from which they came. And then in this way, it means that the models that you initially created, they can't be edited, right? Students can't go in and mess things up or move things around in a way that you didn't want them to, but it means that people can comment on top of the information that's already there, right? They can add their questions and comments in stickies or however they want to do, but then that the original models are still maintained and you don't have to worry about losing them. So this has worked really well. I've done this a few times now, especially in professional development workshops, online workshops, and so that you can make everyone else's everyone's ideas public on the same Jamboard. But again, you can make sure that the work isn't in any way altered. So, okay. So what we're gonna do is have a gallery walk. So if you're in the slides, you should be able to click up here on the otter models and seek observations. Oh, and I should say, I also included your seek observations in case people were curious about what other people observed yesterday. So I'm gonna copy and paste this link into the chat. Can everyone see that link? Did it pop up? Okay. So make sure that link is working and you can open up that Jamboard. So what I'd like you to do is look at the other group models that were created yesterday and also maybe the other seek observations and think about what are the similarities and differences among the models, and are there components of your model you want to now add or remove or modify based on maybe what you're seeing from the collective knowledge of the group. Use stickies to put comments or questions on the models. The comments, again, should really help move the explanations forward. So not just, good job, or I disagree, or I agree, but really saying like, oh, I was thinking about that too. I'm wondering if, so it could be a question, it could be a statement based on something that you knew that isn't on their model that you think might be a good resource to help move their model forward. So think about providing comments from that perspective. And just so you know, for Jamboard, for those of you who are new to Jamboard, students are encouraged, if you want comments to not be anonymous, because everything is anonymous. I can't really tell who did what yesterday. All I can see is that there are lots of different colors on the Jamboards, which is great, which tells me that lots of people were contributing, or different people were contributing. But if you want students to be held accountable for the comments that they make and the number of comments or something like that, make sure that they're putting their initials on their stickies so that they know. So now we're going to spend the next, let's say we're going to spend around 6 to 8 minutes going through the Jamboard. So is everyone able to get the Jamboard up and running? Were we able to do that? Okay, see lots of thumbs up. Cool. So I'm going to stop sharing, but I'll put the Jamboard up on my shared screen. Or is it better if I just keep this like this so you can all look at your own screens more easily? So let's take about 6 to 8 minutes and look through the Jamboards and see what's there. And so, keep in mind, we're going to be using all of this collective knowledge as we move forward today. Okay, I see some comments popping up. Great. I'm going to share my screen really quickly for those people who might be watching this later. Just going to show you what we're all looking at. So this is group 1's model. And their seek observations. And group 2.
So Jessica, you're sharing your screen right now?
I'm sharing my screen right now. Can you guys see it?
So how do I can see your screen, but now where is my Jamboard?
Oh, okay. I will stop sharing so you can go back to your Jamboard more easily.
So you can't do both?
You can, you just have to be able to reduce your screen in Zoom. So it just, there's a setting where you can get out of full screen. So you might just have to find that. But
where is that? I need to learn how to do that. Is it up in the corner or?
So Whitney, I think you're muted if you want to.
I was trying not to be intrusive. There should be at the top, if you kind of hover, there should be a drop down, and it's kind of like a little bar at the top. And if you click the downward arrow, you'll get a bunch of options, one of which is exit full screen.
Thanks, Whitney.
You're welcome, sorry.
You won't see it right now because I'm not in full screen. But let's see if I can go back and you can practice. Let's see. Okay, now try it.
Okay.
Right where it says
So
view option.
View options, and so I can exit the full screen? Or
yep. And it'll
what
just,
I want to do? Exit.
Yep. And it'll just shrink down my screen that I'm showing you so you can see your own screen behind
So I can
it.
then move you aside and then
Yep.
work on mine. I see. Okay,
Exactly.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Whitney.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the things using all these different apps, right? You have to be able to kind of flow through them all.
Yep. Yeah, so that's a good point. So if I were doing this with students, I probably wouldn't mess around with showing. I might quickly show what this looks like, right? But then I would have students go in to the Jamboard without me sharing my screen. And the great thing about Jamboard, right, is like I can, as the instructor, I can see what's going on in real time on all the different pages. I can flip between everything and see and monitor what's going on. So,
but students can't.
Students can too, if they have the links to the Jamboards. Yeah. So, but if I, like the links that that we gave you yesterday, you could go in technically and see other groups' Jamboards. Yep.
How can you tell the difference between the stickies? Like what is being added and what was there before?
Yep, that's a good question. So if you click on the stickies that are being added, you can actually highlight them, but the ones that are part of the original model, you can't click on them. They're part of the big background.
Okay, so you have to put your cursor over it to know?
Yep, to know. Yep.
Because just as we go through all the different pages or the different groups, it all looks like one thing to me. I don't know who added or didn't. I guess it doesn't really matter, but.
Yep, but what we could do is say you only are going to use green stickies for new comments.
Right.
And so then you know that all the green stickies are, yep. So we could have done that, but we didn't. But that's a good idea. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. Okay, so let's just take another minute or so. Has everyone been able to make at least one comment and see most of the models? How are we doing? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing that. We're going to go back to our PowerPoint. All right. So let's come back together. Is everyone in a place where they can stop, make your last comment? So one of the next steps that we can do, now that all of the ideas have been made public, right? Everyone knows what's for the most part, what's on the other Jamboards and the other models. So what we want to do now is think about what are the most essential parts that seem to show up in all of our models. Okay, so there are a lot of things that are common. There's some things that are different. Some of you even noted, like, I really like this. This is a great idea. You know, maybe that was something that wasn't on your model, but that you would like to include in your model now. So let's make what we call a gotta have it checklist. These are the things that we know we all want to include in our in our models. So would anyone like to start us off? What's something that you saw in most or all of the models that you think is really important to include at this point, that would help us explain the return of otters to Marin? This is that wait time I was talking about.
In the comment section, we have conservation efforts from Danielle.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Danielle. Okay, so conservation efforts. Does anyone agree or disagree or want to raise their voices about this? And is this something that we think is likely important? Or would anyone like to expand? What do we mean by conservation efforts? Can someone tell me more? What are we conserving? What does that mean?
For me, when I say conservation efforts, it encompasses like the new rules and regulations that have been added to increase or decrease pollution and increase the conservation of the specific wetlands where these certain animals live. Also, yeah, rules and regulations, new practices.
What do you mean by that? Explain more. New practices for?
Just of how the area is treated, how people, I actually see a lot of signs for trying to get people to not be so interactive with the animals, like let them be, they're not supposed to be familiarized with you. Like this is an observation only, try not to touch them or feed them.
Interesting. So it has to do with a lot of things. So you're saying that it increases, when you increase wetlands, you mean like the area, right? The size of it? Yep.
Yeah.
And then that there are new practices for how the area is treated. So
people interaction with that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna make this a step. So new practices for how people interact with the area. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we could call that maybe how it is treated. So examples that you gave: don't interact with the animals, observation only, don't feed them. Does anyone agree with this? Have we experienced this? Have we seen this in our local parks, in the way that we are told to behave when we are in potential otter habitat?
Can I also just build on that idea?
Yes, please do.
Just also in terms of, yes, people being more aware of it with these things that were mentioned, and then also all the restoration efforts that our county provides and all the different organizations that work within our county to restore our watersheds, and maybe using them as resources, but then also just wondering how much those efforts in the past 40 years have impacted our question.
So is that a question or is that a statement? Because I think either one would be a great addition to this. What do you
both.
think? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this has happened, right? There have been restoration efforts, but the question is how much have those mattered in this?
Yeah.
Plan? Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone want to build on that idea of what do we mean by restoration? What does that look like? Any ideas from your experience? What's being restored?
Out here in West Marin, the restoration of the Giacomini wetlands, when the park went in and bought the Giacomini farm and eliminated the dikes that were put in place for water diversion and water impoundment, the annual dikes that were put in that changed the stream flow and turbidity. And so there's an enormous wetland restoration there just by returning the land and walking away, taking the human constructs off the land and letting it return.
Interesting. Take the human constructs out of the land and let it return. Does that sound like conservation to everyone else who's here? Would we agree that that's a restoration? Is that embody what we mean by a restoration effort? Thank you for adding that, Dawn.
Also in the chat from Roberta and Sarah, they've commented on planting native plants and pulling non-native plants. And Julie as well.
And why might that be important? Thank you for that contribution, but why might that be important? Any thoughts?
I'm thinking about my Seek contribution yesterday, and it was an invasive reed that lives along waterways. And I'm wondering if maybe non-native plants change like the direction that the water flows, similar to what Dawn said, not necessarily a human-made physical barrier, but like an organic barrier.
Interesting. So thank you for contributing that, Whitney. So if we're changing the water flow, either through things that humans construct, right? Or because there are now plants that are present that are not native that change the water flow, why might the water flow be important? What else could we add to this? Did everyone have something about water in their models? Was it water flow? Oh, I see some nods yes, I see some nods no. Did most of you say just water, or did you say water flow? Some of you also had other language about water. Do you want to share what some of those were? Do you think they're important or essential? I see some nods. I see Jordan nodding. Jordan, do you want to share some of the words you used to describe the water?
I don't know that we use that too much. I was just nodding, seeing like Julie and the comments call back to what maybe was on her groups or someone else's. They had written something about levels and temps, and then I was thinking about like, well, first I want to make sure I understand, what was your question again?
What are the other ways we can think about the water and how the water might have changed or be affected? So I heard you say temperatures. The temperature might be important. And I'm sorry, I have not been keeping up with all of the amazing stuff in the chat.
Levels of water to water level, yeah.
I'm seeing pH and then water levels. Yep. Turbidity. Thanks, Dawn. I think that's above. I mentioned turbidity here. So lots of things about water. Okay. And what the water, the qualities of the water.
So Jessica, can I just add something?
Yeah.
This is Chris.
As
we're talking, I think this conversation is good, but I'm finding it really overwhelming to like go back and through all the slides as we're talking, you know, and trying to figure it out, and the conversation's going, and I feel a little left behind. So I'm not participating as much as I usually do. I just wonder, you know, thinking of teaching, if it's better to, you know, have the kids or have them write down, give them, you know, 5 minutes, what are some of the commonalities, and then giving them specific, like specifically, let's look at water. I want you to look at conservation, like giving them kind of the pointers so that you can spend your time, because I'm feeling like as people are talking, I don't know if you feel the same way, everybody, but just thinking out loud, like I want to participate, and then I get confused, and then I'm holding back. And I know that a lot of this is trying to get students to engage.
Yep. Yes. Thank you so much for that comment, Chris. Anything else you want to add to that, or oh, go ahead.
I just feel like the comments everybody's making are really good, but I'm not having the time to like look at it. So I'm thinking, you know, this is maybe, you know, you could expand this for a couple days, you know, yes. And I know we're going through it quicker because, you know, we're in the program, but there's just so much good stuff that maybe there's some independent study in this too, so that kids can really absorb it and then come back with all these answers, you know, after a little bit of time.
I completely agree with you, first of all,
okay.
Yes. So thank you for bringing that up. So yes, as you said, we're going through this way faster than you would in a real classroom, right? I would say that just this activity alone should probably take at least 45 minutes, right? The gallery and the gallery walk itself could also take additional time depending on if this is homework, if it's something that they do, as you said, they do an independent exploration and they're taking notes. And you could scaffold this a lot more with much more specifics. I just gave you the prompt, what are similarities and differences among the models, but I could have said, look for water, look for things related to pollution, look for things related to restoration. Do you see all of those? But the other thing is you want students to kind of draw those out themselves if they can, if they're ready for them. But as you mentioned, that takes time. So yes, we are time limited, unfortunately, today. But if I had done that with the class, I probably would have taken a good, you know, hour and a half to 2 hours to do this full routine with them, if I hadn't given part of it as homework. So.
Right. Well, now we're moving into like remote learning time. So, you know, you could do this group thing and then you're like, okay, homework tonight is to go through these and, you know, pick out 5 commonalities and come back with that tomorrow. And then the next day, you know, they hand them in, you make your note, and then, so, because you're going to be doing synchronous and asynchronous learning, you know.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Exactly.
I'm just, it's all on my mind right now, but thank you. This is a great project.
I hear you. No, and I completely agree with you. This is not something that you want to rush through. And I think this is often a part of our teaching moves and our repertoire that we sometimes think like, okay, students share their ideas and now we're going to move on. But no, the idea, as you said, is you want everyone to be engaging, to feel that they're coming to the table prepared with the knowledge that they have. And so I completely agree with you. This is not something to rush through. This is something to make sure that you are doing effectively to engage everyone. And again, you could even mix this up. You don't have to do this all as a big group to start. You could do breakout rooms again. And if we had time, I actually probably would have done that. I probably would have had you go back to your model groups first, discuss what you saw. What are the things that aren't on your poster or on your model that you might want to change first? And then I would bring everyone back together after they had done that synthesizing in smaller groups first. So, and yes, if we'd had time, we probably would have done that. So, so thank you. And I see a lot of
it's funny because if things go too fast, you just shut down, you know, and then that's probably why you get the kids, you know, getting off video or they're not coming the next time because it just gets too overwhelming is, you know, my experience from the other side.
Exactly.
Anyway, it's just been good to be on the student side versus the teacher side in these workshops, because you realize, especially me coming in a couple of days later, you know, I'm trying to catch up. And so any kid that, you know, didn't start the year quickly or engaged or fell behind, you kind of shut down. It's just interesting being on the other side. So
it is. And that's why I think in all of the workshops that I'm doing pretty much from now on, hopefully for the rest of my career, what I want is for everyone to experience learner mode, as I would, you know, as people call it, right?
Yeah.
Like don't just be to keep your student hat on and talk through like, this is what you would do, and then you would do this, and then, but to experience the work as learners, to immerse yourself in that process is really important in order to understand, especially this kind of teaching that's responsive to NGSS, and what does it feel like, so that you can then, as you said, I think, empathize and relate to the student experience and figure out, okay, yeah, it didn't work. It didn't work keeping you guys all in a big group. So next time I'm going to divide them up, and hopefully that'll get more people talking and more people feeling confident about the ideas that they were able to gather and share. So I completely agree with you. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm trying to be mindful of the time. So I hate to cut off this discussion. But thank you all for your contributions to our Gotta Have It checklist that we were working on at the end here. So again, a lot of ideas about water, restoration, making sure the habitat is returning to something maybe prior to human impact. Throughout a lot of the other models or that I looked at, there's discussion about like food sources and other things that otters need. So again, if we had more time, we would build out this Gotta Have a checklist, and maybe we would consolidate some things, right? We'd make like 4 or 5 main bullet points of like, these are the things, let's make sure we're all addressing these and making sure that they're present somehow in our models, right? So this is just our first pass. And then collectively we would kind of put them all together and reorganize them, or maybe groups would be, asked to do that in small groups, and then to come up with 5 main bullet points. So again, you could break this out in a lot of different ways. But the idea is that now we're all starting with a common checklist moving forward about the things that we think are most important. So over the break, no big homework, but if you want to take some time to just revisit your models and think about some of the changes you might be making at this point, if you had time, feel free to do so. And I'll stay on the Zoom line for a few more minutes if people have questions, but thank you. And I look forward to seeing you at 1:15 for our second session of the day.
Jessica, it was really helpful too. This is Chris.
Hi, Chris.
When you did the review and kind of keeping things on the slide, for just to review where we are, in case you have new students or kids that are just getting engaged. So it gives them a chance to participate at whatever level, and then they can go back and review it. I thought that was really good too. Anyways, you're an amazing instructor. I'm here on Jamboard. How do I get back to Zoom now? Like, how do I go back and forth easily?
So you should be able to
just go onto the Zoom image.
Yep, go back to the Zoom image. Yeah. Here, let me stop sharing. That might also make it easier for you to find where there's like an icon. So I'm on a Mac, so all of my all of the different applications I have running.
It just took me to my Zoom board to my account, so that didn't work.
But now I stopped sharing.
I need to learn how to navigate between them all. Okay, so now I'm back to the